Just over 3 years ago, George Perry Floyd Jr. was murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis during an arrest after a store clerk suspected that Floyd had used a counterfeit $20 bill. Derek Chauvin, one of the four police officers who arrived on the scene, knelt on Floyd's neck and back for more than 9 minutes. "I can't breathe," Floyd wheezed to no avail. The incident renewed calls for police reform. However, with Republicans in charge of the House of Representatives, nothing has happened. We'll talk about police reform with our guest, conflict resolution expert, Dwayne Bryant. So stay with us.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no holds barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people, some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Best-selling author Dwayne Bryant founded Intervision International Incorporated, or IVI, which provides results-oriented social emotional curricula and professional development workshops for students, parents, teachers, law enforcement, academic institutions, and corporate America. Dwayne provides leadership, life management, and social emotional training. As a result of Dwayne's work improving police and community relations and educating parents about the potential dangers of social media, he was awarded the FBI Director's Community Leadership Award. In the wake of the public outcry against police brutality, Dwayne created the Stop series, which includes an online 17-part series, The New Conversation, Improving Police and Community Relations, explaining the tensions between police and Black and brown communities. Hey, Dwayne, welcome to our podcast. Tell me about your work, man.
So
All right.
my involvement with police and community really started because of my 24 years of working in schools across the country with inner city kids. One day I was doing a bullying workshop and I asked a group of students, hey, if you're on the playground playing, minding your own business and doing nothing wrong, if a police car drove over, what would you do? And these students said, run. I said, wait a second, I don't think you understood me properly. I said, you're minding your own business, you're doing nothing wrong. Why would you run? They said, because we don't want to get shot. We don't want to get harassed, and we don't want the police to stop us from going home. Two of the bigger boys said, I wouldn't run, but if they disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect them. Okay. And I was sitting there, whoa, this is going to be a major problem in our children's future, because those students were fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. And that's when I knew we had to have a voice of reason, not just for the community, but for police and community.
Okay. So you said you were working with 20 some years in schools. Exactly what were you doing?
Sure. So my company, we've developed curriculum. So we teach them goal setting, time management, conflict resolution, study skills, the power of words, hope, leadership, hygiene, first impressions. We teach life management skills because ultimately we want to be able to have our students prepared for the real world and prepare for their future. And we've also discovered that if you can impact a child's self-esteem, that will make them want to do better academically. And if you can give them a vision of themselves in the future, they'll do better in the present.
Okay, Dwayne, so you've been doing that for 20 plus years?
Yes, I incorporated Intervision International in 1997. We were doing work before I incorporated, but then it became official in 1997.
Okay. The schools hire you to do this?
Correct. There's schools in Chicago Public Schools, South Suburb, West Suburb, Orange County in Florida, Broward County, Palm Beach County. I work with the Kent School District in Seattle, School District in Pennsylvania, Roosevelt School District in Phoenix, okay. Arizona, and others across the country.
Okay, great. I want to get more into your work in a little bit, but before we get to that, the Justice Department has issued a report that says the Minneapolis Police Department engaged in the systemic use of excessive force and discriminated against minorities for years before the Floyd killing in 2020. What needs to be done, in your view, to resolve conflicts between the police and residents, particularly in the Black and brown communities, Dwayne?
Sure, there's several things that need to be done, but the first and most important is accountability. Here's
Uh-huh.
the deal. When you have police officers that know no matter what they do, unless it's just the most egregious act, their police union is going to protect them, they have no consequences, then they will continue with some of the rogue actions that some of the officers have. So, for instance, in Chicago, the Department of Justice had the same finding with CPD. They found that Chicago police officers engage in a pattern and practice of using force, including deadly force, that is not reasonable. CPD had not provided officers adequate guidance. CPD failed to hold officers accountable. They also found that CPD engaged in a pattern and practice of force that violates the individual constitutional rights. They engaged in tactically unsound foot pursuits that led to officers shooting someone. So there's been so many different things that Chicago Police Department has been found guilty of by the Department of Justice. And I can guarantee you that it's going to probably be the same exact thing with Minneapolis. Poor discipline when discharging their weapons. Police officers shot at suspects who presented no immediate threat. That is a police problem. That is not a community problem.
Okay. Now, talking about Chicago, you made the comment that electing Brandon Johnson as mayor shows a turn for the better when it comes to improving the relationships between cops and the community. Why is that? Is that because he supports having more mental health workers or what?
A combination of things. He definitely supports more mental health workers. And many officers, when they're called out into the scenes, a lot of the situation that they're called for is about mental health. It's not just crime, it's not drugs and things of that nature. A
Yeah.
lot of officers are not trained to deal with certain type of mental health issues, and that's when many of those occurrences go wrong. In addition to that, though, Brandon Johnson, he is from Chicago, born and raised there. He has a wife there, he has children there. So he has skin, blood, teeth in the game. He is vested and interested in making sure that Chicago transformed from an academic standpoint in terms of education, from a financial standpoint in terms of the business community, from a crime standpoint, etc. So literally, his whole life is on the line as it comes to the mayor of Chicago.
Okay. Now, last year, Congress passed the Law Enforcement De-escalation Training Act, requiring the Department of Justice to develop training curricula on topics including alternatives to the use of force, de-escalation, and responding to a person in crisis. Now, I presume that was a positive step, but what else is needed, Dwayne?
Well, those are positive steps. But here's what's interesting. We can have all the training we want, but if someone's heart is bent on destroying certain members of the community, for instance, in 2014, the FBI stated that many neo-Nazis and white supremacists have begun to join law enforcement across the country. Let's
Mhm.
pause for a second. These individuals have a sworn oath to their brotherhood. Even though they take the oath that we protect and serve community, their true oath is to their allegiance to their brotherhood. So if I am a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi in uniform, you had better believe my professionalism is not going to override my implicit bias, my explicit bias, as well as my general overall racism. So we also need to be really screening who is coming to the police force. Do they have swastika tattoos on them? Do their social media say, we kill, we hate black people are monkeys, or gay people are this, or Jews are this? So there's a lot of background investigation work that needs to be done to make sure they get the right type of individual, because once they're on the force, it's a little bit more difficult to ensure that they're going to behave, and chances are they won't.
That law was passed by the House and Senate, and it was signed by Biden on December 27 last year.
Oh,
Um,
that wasn't the George Floyd Act.
no, we're going to get to
Yeah.
George Floyd in a minute.
Okay.
We're going to
Okay.
get to that. But no, this was this other much weaker bill that was
Let's
passed.
train, let's provide better training and things of
Yeah.
that nature. Okay, we can agree to that, but it doesn't really have accountability measures in it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. What's your view of the political situation in the U.S. today? Did actions by the Trump administration affect relationships between the community and the police?
Absolutely, because if you remember when Trump was at some speech, he said, "Hey, if you happen to arrest them and bump their head on the top of the car or put the handcuffs a little too tight, we're not going to hold that against you."
Yeah,
What is
right.
that saying?
Yeah.
That's saying if you happen to use some excessive use of force, if you happen to use that billy club, or maybe even just make sure we don't get it on body camera and we can justify it, and we'll make sure nothing happens to you. So right away, that was that dog whistle across the country saying, yo, this is not even about law and order. This is about we're going to be punitive, we're going to punish criminals. But what's funny is the criminals who cause the most havoc, those that are in banking and those white collar criminals who cause people to go and rob and steal, they never seem to get the same type of punishment that street criminal get. So if we're going to lock up criminals and treat them certain kind of way, let's start from the very top at the White House and let's go all the way down.
So, Dwayne, with that having been said, it's no wonder that those two bigger black kids that you were referring to a minute ago said what they said.
Absolutely. In this young generation, respect is more important than grades, is more important than a lot of different things. So if they feel as though they're being disrespected, they're not being taught at home, no matter what you respect authority. No. What's taught at home is if someone respects you, you respect them. If someone hits you, you hit them back. If someone says something to you, you say something back. So that is going to create a chaotic society.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to get to the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act of 2021. They tried to
Okay.
pass it in 2020. It failed. Republicans blocked it. In 2021, the Democratic controlled House, on a mostly party line vote, passed that bill. But it died in the Senate, where Democrats were in control by one vote, but they didn't have the filibuster proof majority that they needed. So Republicans had blocked it. And our buddy Tim Scott, who is a senator from South Carolina, he was negotiating that legislation for the Republicans and opposed any kind of strong measures at all, and introduced this other bill, which the Democrats said, nah, no, no, no. So the bill died. Now, the intent was to hold law enforcement accountable for misconduct, improve transparency, and reform police training and policies. The police unions opposed it. Now, what are your thoughts about all of that?
Here's the deal. Many, not all, many police unions are only concerned with keeping their officers on the payroll. They're not concerned about training. They're not concerned about accountability. They're not concerned about high levels of professionalism within their ranks, which is the biggest problem, and which is why some police union leaders are pathetic, is probably the best word I can use. But since we're on the show, I won't use that word. I'll just say they have a potential for more professionalism in their mentality, their thoughts, and their behavior, as well as their actions.
What this is an X-rated show, so you can you can use whatever
Hey,
words.
my mama might be listening, so I won't go that far.
All right, there you go.
But in terms of the police union, so the biggest thing that they don't like is that little dirty word called qualified immunity.
Yeah,
So
okay.
qualified immunity is simply saying, hey, if this police officer is guilty for gross misconduct, excessive use of force, the taxpayer shouldn't be paying all of the bill. They should be paying some of that bill. And I think it was only up to $25,000, which is not terribly bad. If I'm going to take my gun out and take your life and your liberties, I need to have some level of thought before I do that. If I know there's no consequences and I already don't like you based on what you look like, then I'm way easier for me to take that gun and put 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 bullets inside of you. If I know I'm going to be held accountable, if I know my wife, my family, my community is going to be impacted by my actions, I'm much less likely to profile you. I'm much less likely to use excessive use of force against you. So I think what the unions don't like is the accountability. And let's think about it. If we had no accountability for doctors, what kind of world would we live in? For dentists, for school teachers, why are the police the only people who cry and whine when it's time to discuss accountability?
Yeah, so this qualified immunity doctrine, you think it needs to be scrubbed, needs to go away, right?
Qualified immunity, no, absolutely. There should be no qualified immunity. They
Right.
should be held accountable for their actions, civil court as well as criminal court, if they're breaking laws.
Okay. All right. So there should be no way that they should be, just because they're wearing blue, they should be immune from the laws
Here's
of
the
this
deal. Here's
country.
the deal. I just met with a police chief and his command staff yesterday. And someone said in the meeting, some people think that we should be held more accountable because we're police. I said, that's correct. You've been trained, you've been to an academy, you have the right to take my life and my liberty. Are you suggesting that we should be on the same playing field in terms of accountability? If I raise my voice to you, you shouldn't be raising your voice back. You should be de escalating because you should have been trained in verbal judo. So the fact that I raise my voice, but I pose no threat to you, and now you're raising your voice and now you have a gun. No, sir. No, sir. That is unprofessional. Control your emotions, and if you can't, find another job.
Okay. One of the other bill's requirements that, of course, the Republicans objected to would require that federal law enforcement officers use deadly force only as a last resort and that de escalation be attempted. Now, federal funding would be contingent on the adoption of such a policy. I presume you agree that's needed, correct?
What's the options? Deadly force is mandated that it's the last resort. Should it now be the first resort? What are our options here? That to me just sounds like common sense. Why are you killing people just because? This is not the 60s under J. Edgar Hoover and what's the Alabama Bull Connor, where you just say something, I can bust you in your head with a billy club or shoot you. No, we have, how about we have law and order for police departments as well? You don't just get to kill people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So tell me about the new conversation that you developed to reduce tensions between police and communities of color. Tell me about that.
Sure. So usually communities of color always talk about we have to have a conversation with our children, blah, 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 blah.
All
And
right.
my thing is, listen, it's time for a new conversation. It's time for a conversation about mutual respect, not just holding the police accountable, but the community needs to be held accountable as well. Because the reality is, some of the crap that we do in the community is not justifiable. It is not decent. It is not professional. It is not for civilized society. So my
Mm.
thing is we have to discuss mutual respect, shared responsibility, and accountability. I've been called all kinds of crazy names when I've gone into the community to have this conversation because they're like, I should be able to say anything I want to say. No, I
Mm.
can't say anything to you without you ready to knock me across the head. So why do you think you can say anything to a police officer who's under stress 24 hours a day, or at least every minute that they're in this uniform? No, we have to have intelligent dialogue. We have to have police working with community. We have to have community working with law enforcement because in Chicago, I think the homicide rate or the investigation of and closing files is like less than 20%. How can that be? That means that there is no cooperation between police and community. And I always say this anytime there's a chasm between police and community, the
Mhm.
only individuals who win are the criminals. Whether that criminal is wearing a hoodie or whether that criminal is wearing a badge, the only people who want there to be division between police and community are criminals.
Okay. Now, talk to me a little bit about Vision International. Now, you've developed results oriented curricula and workshops for, like you said, over 26 years. Tell me about the work that you're doing there, about those workshops and what they cover and all that.
Absolutely. So we literally help schools and certain districts improve test scores over 35%, reduce suspensions over 70%, eliminate expulsions, quadruple parental involvement, And it's all about our curriculum. Some people call it character education, some call it life management skills, some call it social emotional learning. It's really the same thing in different names.
Okay.
But in essence, what we do is we have our mentors to go into the schools to have intelligent conversation with young people about time management. For instance, there was a parent who was coming to pick up their child to take them to the doctor. And we're like, okay, I thought you were leaving, but you're here 30 minutes later. Don't you have a doctor's appointment? And the parent said after the class was over, she said, why aren't you guys teaching us this information as parents? I've never had a time management workshop. I've never had a goal setting workshop. And they were saying, if you guys teach the parents this information, we can ensure that our students are mastering this and doing better in the classroom. So basically, our goal is to be able to impact these young people's self-esteem, make them more excited about themselves as a human being, about their academics, about their education, and that in turn will make them far less likely to go into a world of crime, far less likely to be a dropout, far less likely to pick up a gun and kill someone, because when you understand you're connected to family, to community, school is a part of that community. When you respect authority, law enforcement is a part of that community, then you're less likely to commit violent acts, criminal acts, and you will become a productive member of society. So that's what my work has been about.
Okay. Now you've got a book about all this, right?
Yes, I do. It is called The Stop,
Well,
Improving Police and Community Relations. Super excited about it. It's about 7 personal encounters I've had with law enforcement. I probably had over 17 police encounters, stops, never been arrested, no criminal history, never had handcuffs put on me, because in every instance, I engage my mind first. Now, it doesn't mean the emotions aren't racing, because there's times I wanted to run, drive away, curse back because they were cursing at me, but I've been able to engage mine. And it's unfortunate that me as a civilian is the one who's de-escalating versus some of the officers who went straight to the escalation area.
why was it that you were stopped so many times or had these
Well, a
encounters?
couple things. In elementary school, chapter 1 is called Borrowed Bikes. Now, my mom had 6 children, single parent mom. She did not have money to buy us bicycles, but she always insisted that we go to white schools because white kids get better education than the kids in black schools. So after school, my white colleagues, they didn't lock up their bikes. Who knew? So my brother and I would run outside, jump on the bikes, ride around for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then bring the bikes back before our white colleagues got there to leave. No harm, no foul. One particular day, Bob, we're out there riding, jumping curves, having a good time. We stayed out too long. So we hear these sirens coming behind us. What the heck? So my brother's like, dude, let's drop the bike and run. I'm like, no, let's just take them back like we always do. So literally the chapter is about this whole conversation that's going on. Then we finally stop. The police is behind us. Hey, what are you guys doing? Nothing, officer. We're just riding some bikes.
Yeah.
Whose bikes are those? Oh, these are our friend's bikes. Okay, what's your friend's name? We're like, oh no, what's going on? So he's grilling us, and we're like, oh no. So my mom,
How old were you, Dwayne, when that
this
happened?
was sixth grade. Sixth grade.
How did
Counter
your
sixth grade.
You started your career of crime in the 6th grade?
Why I'm committed to making sure our people do not have a life of crime. And so
Okay.
my mom comes over.
Right.
She finally shows up and she said, what's going on? And he says, ma'am, your sons have stolen bikes. And mama gave that look. We're like, ooh, please lock us up. Please take us with you. Don't let us go home with this woman. And because we knew what was going
We
to happen.
want to go to jail.
Exactly. Please take us to jail, sir. And so she tells him, officer, my sons know better than to steal. Whose bikes are this, sons? Mom, it's just one of our friends. They didn't lock their bikes up, blah, blah, blah. We do it all the time, blah, blah, blah. So he said, ma'am, I have to decide what I'm going to do. And my mom said, officer, please don't put your handcuffs on my boys. And please don't put them in the back seat of your car, because she understood the emotional turmoil that could cause.
Right.
And he said, I tell you what, if I don't take them to jail, what's going to stop them from stealing again? She said, I'm going to beat their asses so good, they will never steal anything from anybody for the rest of their lives. And he said, ma'am, I'm not telling you to beat your kids. And my mom said these words, Bob. She said, I'm going to beat them before you have to beat them with your billy club or shoot them in their backs. And we were like, what? is she talking
Oh,
about? Shoot us in our back for riding a bike? Every kid today knows exactly what my mom was talking about. We had no clue. So that was
exactly.
chapter one. Chapter two was an incident in high school. Chapter three was my father, who was a police officer, believe it or not. His nickname was Bull Bryant because he'd go across your head with a billy club quickly if you did not comply with his orders. Chapter four is an incident in college. Chapter five is an incident in Chicago, six, seven, up through chapter eight. So they're all lessons that we all can learn from, lessons of humanity, lessons of innocence, lessons of sometimes excessive use of force, lessons of when the police is out of order, what are your responsibilities? Because ultimately you want to get home safely, which is why I created that thing right here, which is called the Stop Challenge. And it's
Okay.
9 steps to getting home safely.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Now, where was I? I got lost in my, I was so involved, enthralled with what you were saying. I've lost my place in my notes here. Let's see the workshops. As a graduate of the FBI Citizens Academy, you're a community advisor to the Chicago Civilian Office of Police Accountability. So, what's all that about?
Yes, so the Police Office of Civilian Accountability is called COPA. COPA's mission is to be a leader in police accountability by conducting thorough investigations to advance the culture of policing and build trust in civilian oversight. So, in essence, COPA is a body, I believe 1 or 1.5% of our funding comes directly from Chicago Police Department. COPA has its own investigators. We have our own department per se. And basically, the purpose and the nature of COPA is to conduct its independent investigations, to have, I won't say oversight, but to make recommendations. So, for instance, there's an officer in Chicago. His name is James Hunt. He should never be a police officer anywhere. He was following a group of young kids, and they're like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm following you before you commit a crime, so I can be there when you commit it." He was like, "What?" And then they talking trash back and forth, and he tells them, "Hey, I kill motherfuckers." They're like, "What? You kill what?" So he's telling them, "Yeah, your mama." And so this is a police officer offensively harassing community members in an unprofessional way, but he never got relieved of his duties. As a matter of fact, he got promoted. And so COPA says, "Hey, here's a complaint that the community has made about a police officer. We investigate it." They talk to the people, they talk to the officer, they look at the body cam, and when they see that, yo, all of this lines up, our recommendation is you get rid of them, you train them, or maybe the community is incorrect. There's been shootings that COPA has investigated that were justified shootings that the community was up in arms about. But when you look at all the evidence, when you look at the 12 different body cameras, the light cameras on the pole cameras, etc., yo, this person was justified in their shooting. And so this was a justified shooting. So what we try to do is have some level of accountability and transparency on behalf of police as well as on behalf of community so that they can understand, hey, there is a body here that's trying to at least ensure transparency and honest communication.
So, what strategies can cities like Chicago and Minneapolis employ to reduce excessive use of force and misconduct by police? Now, we've talked about some of that, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that
Well, the
conversation?
only thing I'd like to add is here's the deal. I am much less likely to use excessive force on someone that I at least see them as a human being,
Uh,
that I at least see them as someone that I can respect and is worthy of my respect. I
mhm.
am much less likely to not use force on someone that I do not see as a human being. If I see you, you have the locks in your hair, I automatically think you're a thug and a criminal because of my own implicit or explicit bias or even racism, then you better believe I'm going to jack you up. So the police departments need to make sure they're hiring the right people, men and women. They're checking their psychological backgrounds. Police departments need to also do drug investigations on their own officers because 4,500 officers have been decertified because of drugs and alcohol in their system on the job in uniform. That's a problem. So
Wow.
I would say ensuring the highest level of professionalism, make sure that also police officers get mental health, mental wellness checks, It is a very stressful, a very demanding job. They deserve respect. They deserve to make sure that their mental well-being is being taken care of, because when it's not, and you're stressed and you're under stress in these situations, you have a split second sometime to make a decision, and stress can make you make the wrong decision. So we need to look out for our police officers because they are community members. We also need to make sure we're looking out for community, and we need to make sure that they're cooperating and working together. If there's any level of dehumanization, that person does not deserve to be in a uniform.
Yeah, Dwayne, but to achieve that, does legislation have to be passed by Congress, or are these policies that can and should be enacted individually by police departments, or both of the above? What do you
Yeah, that answer would be D, all of the above, because you can have legislation, but if the police, literally, I've heard police departments say, listen, we're tired of all this crap. We're tired of being told we're racist. We're tired of being told, oh, we don't want to hear that crap anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're doing is digging in and resisting the policy changes. So if you make, changes to different policies and the law enforcement resist it, then that's not doing anything for the police department or the community. Yeah. So it needs to be a combination of things, but it also needs to be a series of conversations with police, because why do they feel the way they do? And if you, let's say if you are a white supremacist, fine. Patrol white neighborhoods where you won't allow that to impact your level of professionalism, even though every white neighborhood is going to have a black person coming in and out at some point. We really need to make sure we got the right men and women in uniform.
Okay. Got anything else you'd like to add?
Hey, man, I just want to say I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you do. If anyone wants to see the story of The Stop, they can go to Amazon.com, The Stop, Dwayne Bryant. Also, they can check out my website, DWAYNEBRYANT.com. I also have a YouTube channel under the same thing. And also, Bob, because of my work, I just created this beautiful design here. It's called God Works. And we have another design called Love is Everything, because it's time for us as a nation to either or get back to God, start loving each other, loving ourselves, or get back to love. Because when I look at China, they're educating their youth. They have a unified country, at least seemingly. They're looking at calculus, trigonometry, artificial intelligence. We're looking at TikTok, social media.
Which China sent us, by the way.
Huh?
Which China sent us, by the way.
Listen, wouldn't you, if you have an enemy, wouldn't you want to destroy them from the inside with foolishness and ignorance, especially when you know they love foolishness and ignorance?
All right. Okay. Listen, man, I appreciate it. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this Lean to the Left video and that you learned something as well. Please come back on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that I hope you find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. And you can check out the schedule of upcoming shows, guests, and topics at podcast.leantotheleft.net. You can also subscribe to our audio version there or to our video shows here at YouTube. And follow us on social media. Facebook at the Lean to the Left Podcast, Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at BobGaddy_Lean to the Left, and TikTok at Lean to the Left. Our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we and our guests comment on the latest developments in the news and about the social issues that concern us all. This is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.